Welcome to another installment of From the Shelf. This time I share the story of my hot rod skinny vet. This one began in 2009 as a group build hosted by Dr. Cranky, even before he made YouTube videos. We ran together a bit, and he even considered me a part of his styrene stars. On a long-lost forum, he hosted a rat rod build-off. It only had two major rules: post-progress and no shiny paint, which got me thinking. What is a rat rod? Many think of a rusty, cobbled-together contraption. I like Pat Ganal's idea that it's more a culture or attitude than just a collection of parts. I knew Cranky liked rusty, cobbled-together contraptions, but he only stated no glossy paint. So I started to think about what could still have the attitude, but also define an anti-rat. Checking out the stash, I pulled out AMT's version of America's first sports car, the iconic '53 Corvette. I also like this subject since it's fiberglass, and it couldn't be rusty. Others had customized early Corvettes before, but I really wanted to cut one up. Some of the most epic hot rods of that era were the Indy Roadsters, so that would be an inspiration as well. To satisfy the post-progress requirement, I stated I would build a model around this one seat. Much of the other progress would be vague typed-out descriptions, which often aggravated some of the other participants. I was still amused. So how was it built? First, the body was marked where it seemed to make sense to save as much of the Corvette's characteristics. Then it was time to cut it apart. The grille and hood opening were sectioned to keep their rounded corners. Then the rest was just taped together to see if this would even work. It made sense to butt the rocker panels up to the sides of the stock frame. This also allowed the stock track to remain. With the body sectioned down low, it had the look I had in mind. The stock straight 6 engine was also part of the plan, with the narrowed hood opening framing it nicely. A lot of cosmetic surgery was needed to recreate the face of this model. At this point, I felt like it was starting to laugh at me, though. But it was time to mud it up and begin the sand bondo repeat phase. While that was going on, I started to think about the suspension. I really liked Ed Big Daddy Ross' giant springs he would put on his vehicles, so I decided to try that for this one. The spring pockets were cut off of a little coffin show rod frame and molded to the front of the Corvette frame. I modified some lower control arms to accept the front-mounted springs and incorporated a front axle from a monogram 1940 Ford. The rear suspension was also modified. I used the rear axle and trailing arms from a 1959 Cadillac, so the coil springs would match the front. With the chassis work figured out, it was time to soup up the engine. I liked the look of the aftermarket Wayne crossflow head, so I went through my stash of 6-cylinders to find the best parts. Most wound up coming from the Galaxy 1947 Chevy. Then I scratch-built a simple log intake manifold to mount a set of 6 carbs, one for each cylinder. Various header ideas were tried out before I decided to just scratch-build these from solder and tubing. This was one of the few in-progress photos that got posted to the forum during the build. I liked the idea of an external exhaust, so those are scratch-built from plastic and aluminum tubing and routed through holes I drilled in the front fenders to connect to the headers. Another photo I posted to the forum was this brake set from Replicas and Miniatures. This was one of the last parts needed to complete the chassis fabrication. The dash was one of the more complicated parts, and required some severe sectioning. Despite that serious surgery, the center gauge cluster was able to be retained. The custom wheels would also need to be kit bashed. These had the diameter I desired, so the outer rim was removed and then was added to the wheel covers from a Revell 57 Cadillac. This allowed them to fit the appropriately sized hot rod tires, complete with separate wide whites. Once in primer, it was starting to look just right. The steering was mounted externally on the driver's side to balance the external exhaust on the other. Here is another of the photos I posted of my in progress. At this point, the mess needed to be cleaned up. So after that, I posted a clean workbench photo to mark the beginning of painting and the final assembly. First, all of the chrome parts were painted with Alclad chrome. The rest of the color palette would be the same as the original 53 Corvette. The frame was painted gloss black, and that contrasts nicely with all that chrome. The engine was painted bright blue for a nod to the original Blue Flame Special. The body was painted pearl white, then I applied a final coat of flat clear to satisfy the no shiny paint requirement. The interior was flat red with bright red flocking for the carpet. I took this last photo before final assembly. The finished model certainly has an attitude. The Cadillac taillights complement the Cadillac hubcaps that I added smooth baby moons to. The windshield came from a Protar Alfa Romeo. The carbs were detailed with metal velocity stacks with Venturis added. The interior was finished in red, just like the original, and includes the stock steering wheel, door panels, and that one seat. The gauges are photo reduced and feature photo etched bezels. When sectioning the body, it was easy to incorporate an opening trunk. Not much is back there except a detailed battery and the fuel filler cap. Once finished, many questioned if this was really a rat rod. I think it totally has the attitude of one. The only rule for the group build was flat paint, and it didn't say it had to be rusty. I had fun taking this model to many model shows, but unfortunately it got damaged and then sat in a box for many years. A little while ago, I decided to get it back out and repair it. The rear wheel mounting point had to be rebuilt, which required removing the body. Over the years, some of the bodywork was starting to show, and the flat clear had yellowed considerably. So I decided to refinish it and give it a proper shiny pearl white finish. So the skinny vet is once again show ready. One thing I wanted on the original build was screens over the headlights, like the original Corvette featured. The ones in the model car garage set were too large to work before, so I made smaller screens for the rebuild. I hope you enjoyed seeing how this model was built and then rebuilt. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, you know what to do, because I have all kinds of model car stories to tell. Thanks for watching.